I'll start with when I kind of started thinking about doing the certification, which was 2016. So I did my platform dev certification, and back then all you needed was platform dev, and then you had to do the multiple choice exam, and then you went to the review board. And I'm glad I didn't do it back then, because it probably would have been a disaster. So then I believe it was 2017 or maybe late 2016, the pyramid came out when you had to do all the different prerequisites. So I saw that and I was like, oh, wow, there's a lot more I've got to do now. So I think I'll wait. So it wasn't until 2018 that I ended up doing more certifications. And I actually did them because I was building up a partner consulting company and I needed to get another consultant cert. So I had to go get admin so I can get the consultant ones. And then I just kind of started doing them all. And I just was like doing one a week, I think. I ended up doing 19 in like May to December or something that year. So got all my CTA prereqs done in 2018. And then I reached out to Ladies Be Architects and Gemma and said, hey, can I get into a study group? Because I want to start preparing for CTA. So then I joined a study group with her, got to know her. She was actually going to the review board. And then another person, Matt Morris, was going to the review board. So then I started participating in their mocks and judging for them. And I got to sit in on a lot of mocks early 2019 with both of them. So that gave me exposure to what the mocks were like. And, they both were still trying to figure it out as well. There still wasn't a ton of information out there. So when they didn't pass their boards, I kind of said, all right, this is going to be really tough. I've got a lot going on right now. So I walked away for a bit, and it wasn't, and I also did the 601 course in that year as well, which helped me understand what it was all about and what to expect. And I did realize from that, wow, this is really like a lot of work. So I waited really until like August 2020. And that's when I started thinking, all right, I should probably get back on this again. And then I reached out to Salesforce for a date, and then they came back with November 30th. So I was like, all right, well, that gives me a few months to prepare. And then I reached out to Seb at Flow Republic and said, hey, can you help me prepare in like only a few months? I knew his program was 6 months, but I need to do this in a short period. So there was actually me and a few other females. It was me, Susanna, Charlie, and Candace. So we had this little group of us. All of us were me and Susanna had the 30th as our date. I believe Candace was a little bit earlier, as well as Charlie. And we all just, like, by the time it was like, we started in September, and by October, we all were kind of feeling like, all right, this is way too much and we're not going to be ready. So I felt like I wanted to postpone, and all of them postponed. And then I talked to my one-on-one coach who was doing a Papa, and she's like, I really think you could do this. So I decided not to postpone, because I knew if I did, then I went to the back of the line, and I didn't know how long it was going to take to be able to get back in. So I was like, all right, let me just go and take a shot at this. So I did, and everything I had planned for the last 2 weeks kind of fell apart. So I didn't stick to any sort of plan, and I just was feeling really stressed out. I didn't like presenting to community people. So I kind of like didn't really do that. I set up a bunch of presentations and then just didn't really do them because it was really stressing me out. I only presented one-on-one to my coach, and it was like maybe 5 or 6 mocks that I did. So I went to the board and I didn't pass. I passed a few sections, but I didn't pass. And I was close, but there was just a lot that I still hadn't worked out. It just wasn't enough time. So took a step back, and that was really devastating for me. But I talked to some other people, and I talked to a good friend, Johan, who became a CTA through Flow Republic right before that. You probably know him. He posts a lot about CTA stuff, and he really was just like, you can't give up on this. I was ready to give up. And he's like, you can't give up on this. You need to keep doing this. I was like, all right. And then he told me what he did and what his group did. And they were like, we met every day. We just talked through stuff and challenged each other and did mocks, and it just really worked hard at it. I was like, oh boy, that sounds like a lot of work. So I was like, well, then I guess I'm going to have to find a study group now, because I didn't have anyone really that I was working with since my study group before it fell apart, and I was left kind of by myself. So I found that doing it by myself was just really difficult. So that's when I started the Slack group that exists right now, the Architect Study Slack. So it really was just small at first. It was just a bunch of us, kind of like from Flow Republic, and then I posted on the architect group and the Ladies Be Architect group that I had this study group that I was forming, and then if anyone wanted to join, to let me know. So then people started responding, and then before I knew it, it was kind of growing to be like, I would have got to be like 20 people. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what we're gonna do. Like I was thinking like maybe like 5 to 10 people, like we maybe have 1 or 2 little groups. And so then it just kept growing and growing. And so I realized that, all right, I guess this is more of a study community. So there was a bunch of people that started passing the exam. Like, I think it was like January, February. No, it was, the first one was February of last year. And then people just started passing. And I actually found that like, so what I did was I set up starting in January, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, phone calls, and then on Sundays we always had a longer call, and then we did like a mock afterwards. And then the mocks became so popular that we started doing mocks, like 2 mocks on Sunday, and then we were doing them on Saturday. And then it got to the point where it was like, all right, let's move the Sunday call earlier so we could do more mocks on Sunday. It was just funny because it just became this thing where it was like, it just kept growing and growing. And that was what really helped me though, was helping other people. And like you mentioned the why of doing the exam. And I thought to myself, why am I doing this? I don't want to work for a big consulting partner. I don't want like, I didn't want like the typical job that people have when they usually get CTA. So I'm like, why am I even doing this? But through the process, I found that I really loved helping people, and I loved like teaching them. So when even people were going to the board, I was working with them and teaching them what I knew and trying to help them, and then they would pass, and it was like, it was great. And I felt that was very fulfilling. And so I still wasn't totally clear on why I was doing it, but I felt like I had to, because if I was going to continue to help people, I really needed to pass to have that credibility to say, hey, I can help you. So, so then in June, I formed a really small group of 5 of us, and it was all people that had been to the board and didn't pass. So I said, let's just form a group together. Let's all work together and try to do this in the fall. So I did that, and we worked together. We got together every night, Monday through Friday, and then we had a Saturday call through another study group, and then the Sunday call, and then we were doing mocks on weekends. So we were either judging mocks or presenting mocks. So
what was the
mocks.
timeline on that?
For the small group.
But well, yeah, I mean, the evolution of the group and the story, I love that, and I'm really hoping we build that a little bit to what we're doing here, and with a slight variation. I think we love having CTA level conversations on this group and doing the knowledge sharing more than we're specifically focusing on the exam. So right now, I think we're averaging about 1 in 4 of our meetings are exam focused, like mock or topic. And then the rest are really, environmental or ecosystem knowledge sharing to help, people that are CTA. And I'm the same way. I care less about the CTA than I do about the information shared of the people that are at the level going for it. So it's much more interesting for me just to be around CTAs than necessarily care about the cert, but hey, it's kind of hand in hand. So what would tell me again your path for, your small group, and the Ladies Be Architects. I also love to brag that I used to work for Andy Oganoff, who was the CTA organizer for the program. And he always referenced the best study topic or study area was Ladies Be Architects. So what you built was over there was legendary.
Yeah, and it's funny. I've been talking about that recently, and they have so much for like all the prereqs, and like the group I created kind of became like the follow-up to the Ladies Be Architects, like the 2.0, because we really focused on CTA. Like, let's figure out this exam. Let's figure out how to pass it. Let's figure out how to be successful together. And the thing that was really cool is like the people that were passing the exam from like February to May, they all kept coming back, and they were joining our weekly calls, and the weekly calls were like, they're kind of like office hours. So people will bring up topics, or talk about specific requirements and scenarios, or sometimes we actually walk through scenarios line by line to come up with optimal solutions. So it was just a lot of that, like really talking about the topic specific to scenarios and exams. So it was really focusing on what we need to know for the review board. So having people coming back to help us and mentor was really great. And they show up to mocks, they judge mocks. I mean, there's 29 CTAs in the group now, which is amazing. So we have a lot of resources. So it was in June, that's when I formed the smaller group out of my larger group. So the larger group now is over 500 people. So I always encourage people, form a small study group, work together consistently, because that's what will yield results. And we worked together every day from late May or early June to September. So the first two people from our group went in September, and two of them passed and became CTA. So then I pulled in another person that I had met in my 601, another female, because I was like, I really want to help other females through this because we need more. So she came into our group in September because two other people had dates in November and I had one in October. So that gave us a couple months to work together and help her. So she came into the group. So that we had 5, and then we had 3, and then we went back to 4. So then I went in October, then I passed. And then the other 3 went in November, and 2 out of 3 passed, and the other one got a 2-section retake. So we had 5 CTAs at this time. And then the other one just went for his 2-section retake and passed. So now we have 6 out of 6 CTAs from this small group. So that goes to show that when you work like that and you share your knowledge, and there's people from Deloitte and Accenture and where else? Like there was a variety of experience levels in our group, and we all kind of had our strengths and weaknesses and really tried to help each other with our gaps. So we would have a lot of discussion. We would present a scenario and then walk through it line by line for maybe a week. And then someone else would present a new scenario, and then we'd walk through it line by line for a week, like go through their actual solution and really talk about everything and make sure we really fully understood things. So if we didn't fully understand something, we would repeat it and try to explain it to each other, because that's the way you get good at communication. So communication is a huge part of the CTA. The Q&A is really important to make sure you have that communication down and that you can explain things precisely and concisely, because that was something I didn't do for my first board. And the way you develop that is through discussion and making sure that you understand something. So repeating something back to someone, or if something's not clear in your head, making sure you clarify it and then repeat it again to where it makes sense. And you're like, okay, now I get it. And then you know the keywords that are involved in that in that answer that you'd want to give. And then you can, once you really understand it, you don't ramble as much. So that's how you you develop your Q&A strategy and your communication. So what I always tell people is there's 3 different strategies to the board. There's your strategy for how you prepare your presentation, like how you solution and prepare your artifacts. That's something you're going to develop and practice. Then there's your strategy of how you actually present and tell the story, because you really want to tell the story from a user's perspective. And you want to talk more about like, why is this important? Why will this product I'm suggesting or feature I'm suggesting help the business, and how will it help the users? And you really want to talk about that from the user point of view. Like the user is going to click this and then do this, and then this happens and email goes out. It's like to that level, you really want to explain, but then you want to also give the technical details of what's underlying that to facilitate that to happen. And then you need a Q&A strategy. So you need to be able to answer questions pretty quickly, because you need to get through all their questions in 40 minutes. And you need to do it effectively and precisely and use the right keywords and not ramble. So there's a lot that you have to practice. And I can say that from having both the larger study group and the smaller group, I was able to develop all that to the level that I needed to in order to pass. So with that, so then once I did pass, I was still kind of like, now I'm a CTA, what am I going to do with this? And it's really becoming more apparent to me that I want to use my CTA for good. It's not to go up there and be like, some high level manager at one of the big partners, that's not my personality. I'm more of a teacher. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm just going to keep trying to teach other people. So I've started a nonprofit to help train people that are underserved and underrepresented to become CTAs, because we need more diversity in the CTA program, more women, more minorities, just trying to help bring this to people that maybe think it's not accessible to them. So part of my bigger group, the Slack group, was really making this whole thing more accessible, and the sharing of information between all the different groups and all the different companies really made that happen. And even through my consulting company, I'm now shifting my focus to be more about mentorship and coaching. So I'm looking to do like on the job coaching, and even help newer people into like junior entry level people get up to speed, and then even help coach people to become architects. And maybe that happens on the job, and then maybe provide the same sort of CTA training through that as well. But so that's where everything shifted for me. And I'm realizing that, one, I'm using it for good, and two, I'm using it to teach others. So that's where it's ended up for me. And that wasn't clear to me at the beginning. I mean, I always knew that I wanted to help and mentor other women before my first attempt. And what I said was, oh, I got to go pass the exam so then I can go help other people, help other women. Then it will happen. But that's not the way it worked. It didn't happen. So then I went out and started helping other people, and that's what helped me pass. And now I'm continuing to do that. So
yeah, it's the getting conversant in the technology, and that's we started doing a little bit of a fight club here, trying to make people start talking, because I think, and that's what the question I'm about to ask is your opinion on the knowledge versus the fluency in the knowledge as part of your CTA success story.
yeah, well, you need to have both. So I find that very technical people and developers actually have a harder time with the exam, because they're so focused on the technical and the knowledge. And yes, you have to have that, but you have to bring it up to a level where you can really explain it. Like, there's a lot of things that I've always done in my career over the years and never really understood why. So a good example would be OAuth, right? So when I was doing more hardcore Apex development, I was communicating with other systems via OAuth, and they were communicating back to Salesforce using OAuth. And I didn't really understand why. Like, okay, yeah, I know there's a token, and I know that that's used for some sort of authentication to another system, but I didn't really understand why. So in the board, you have to explain the why. If you're suggesting OAuth, you probably want to explain why you want to use it. So the reason is because you don't have to use usernames and passwords and pass those around, and it's more secure because you're not doing that. So like something like that, you want to have that understanding of why are we doing this, and what's the benefit going to be. But you also need to have the knowledge too, because then they'll question you to see how much you really know about this thing you're suggesting. And you need to really be able to explain things end to end clearly and precise.
Do they jump in randomly, or just when they sense that you might not have the full depth of what you're talking about?
So my first and second attempts were definitely different. The first one, it was like, okay, so maybe you suggest using something like a Canvas app, and then you have like maybe a very basic understanding of how it works, and they like might throw some things at you like, well, how exactly will this work for the user, and what will it look like, and like where's the communication happening, and that made me realize, wow, I've got a gap there, so I really have to understand this. So I actually spent some time setting up a Canvas app with Heroku, and I've demoed it like with Apex hours and Cactus Force, because it brought so much understanding to me of how I could use a Canvas app and how the communication could happen back and forth between Salesforce and the app, and the types of things I could do. And so really having that hands-on experience helped me. So I could say I spent a lot of time doing hands-on stuff through the whole journey, because it just really helped me to conceptualize things better and to really understand how something would work for a user. Because if you're not in the system as a user, it's really hard to explain how it's going to work for the user, right? So if you're just spending all your time on the back end and doing technical stuff and writing code, do you really understand how it works for the user? A lot of times not. So I think it's really important to really get into the system as a user, and understand from that perspective. I'm going to say it's less technical than what people think. You have to have a lot of knowledge in certain areas, right? But it's actually less about the technical and more about how can you explain how the platform is going to solve this business problem, and can you sell it to like a executive level person at a company and tell them, and this is how I'm going to manage your risk, and this is how I'm going to make sure the project is successful. Those are the types of things you need to talk about. So you kind of become a little bit more of like a salesperson, like a sales engineer. If that makes sense. So, so you have to have all the technical knowledge and understand what all the capabilities are and really know what's available to you in the platform to solve the business problems in the least complex way, because that's going to bring the least amount of risk and the highest probability of success. So that's the kind of the formula I really try to drill into people. And I'll see people give me solutions where they're automating everything and it's complex. And I'm like, where in the requirement does it say you need to do that? It says this, this, and this. So what's the simplest way you can make that happen without bringing in all that complexity? Because once you bring in complexity, then you're bringing in risk, and then you're maybe the likelihood of the project succeeding then is not as good, and then you might start pushing out timelines, and then you might be given a timeline constraint to think about. So
do you find it's okay, or are you supposed to present the whole canvas as much as the known canvas? Are you supposed to bring in caveats? Do you couch everything and, well, if this and this and this and this and this and that, do you spend a lot of time that, or do you was your goal to stay on what you could thoroughly pitch?
You really do. So are you talking about like they give you something and then you kind of extract a requirement that isn't there?
Or, well, I mean, if there's, okay, so what would you use for data storage? Well, it depends if you're in AWS already, or if you have on-prem storage, or do you go out and do you throw out all the what ifs, or do you just make an assumption and kind of run with it and let them bring the winners?
Yeah, so you want to make assumptions that are always going to go in your favor. So you want to make assumptions to make the thing that you're solving you want to make it your friend. Your assumption should be your friend. So I see people do this all the time. They'll make assumptions to actually make the solution more complex when you could actually assume in the other direction to make it simpler. So I always try to get people to get into that habit of make the assumptions to make things more simple. So here's a good example. I see this a lot. You have you have a requirement for a mobile app that can be used, that has offline capabilities, right? So everyone always goes to, oh God, I got to write a hybrid app. I got to write a custom app. And if you think about it, mobile development isn't that easy, and it takes time, and it could bring more complexity and risk to the project, right? Because there's a whole other work stream that needs to happen now if you're going to develop a mobile app. So what I always tell people is, just because it says offline doesn't mean, they're like, well, the Salesforce One app doesn't have like the greatest offline capabilities. And I say, yeah, okay. So just because it says offline capabilities, where does it tell you that it needs to have fully functional offline capabilities? You can say, I'm going to assume that they only need to access the 30 most recent records that they've cached or something like that. So then we're going to train the users to make sure they cache their records in the mobile app before they leave and lose connectivity, and then they'll have those. Because that statement right there, you can use it in your favor, where I see people a lot of times using it to make their solution more complex. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. No, excellent explanation. Thank you.
Then what will happen is the judges will come back and they'll say, well, what if they need full offline capabilities? Then you say, okay, then we could develop a hybrid app. And then they might say, how does that affect your governance? And you have to know all that. You have to know if you make a change and you suggest something else, what repercussions that has and everywhere in your solution that's going to affect. So.
Very cool. Thank you.
You want to see if anyone else has questions as well?
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, I think I've tried to, oh. Blanca, sorry, I didn't see somebody new come in and didn't allow you to talk. Welcome. Does anybody have any questions for Melissa? I have about 800 more, so.
Happy to answer them. Like I said, this is what I'm finding is I really like to help people and I really like to share knowledge, because that's another thing that's been part of this whole journey is a lot of knowledge has been kept very guarded. And what Ladies Be Architects did is they kind of started taking, like trying to demystify this whole thing and share knowledge and help each other. And so then what we did in our group was we took it to another level and just like really made this so much more accessible and, you know, taking a lot of the mystery out of it. So we share knowledge with each other. It's like I see people become CTA and they just kind of go off and they don't really bother to help anybody or share information. It's just kind of like, I did this and I'm going to hold it to myself, but I don't believe in that.
Yeah, the scarcity of the cert is a little bit of a you know, a catch-22. You want it because it's scarce, but if it stays scarce, then you know it's nobody else can get it, and what's the point of building the ecosystem? And
Yeah.
I do really appreciate you and want to personally thank you for focusing on teaching and giving back, and especially the underrepresented. I consider myself lucky that I have a diverse set of teachers, but it is statistically, and I love to teach, but it's statistically proven that people learn better from people like them. And so if we don't have teacher representation, there are people that are not getting the same opportunity to learn, and that's wasted human capital and wasted potential. And that to me is unacceptable. So I love your goal in your area. So thank you.
I agree. I totally agree with that statement.
All right, Blanca, I tried to let you in again. Thanks for being here. Welcome again. I just opened up for questions.
I apologize. It's actually Allison Park, and Blanca and I are sharing an account. So that's why I tried logging out and fixing Zoom, but hey, it's Allison.
That's
Hi,
the
Allison.
Park Puff, Allison?
Hey, Melissa.
No,
No.
Not that Allison.
Not that,
No,
oh, okay.
That's my twin. That's Rachel.
Oh, okay. Sorry. No
No,
names
quite
and no
all right.
voices and no pictures. It's hard.
Yeah, it is. It is. Thank you.
So we just opened up. Do you guys have any questions? Thanks for joining. Cool. Everybody should be able to talk. I will keep going. So, and Melissa, whenever you feel like you've got other things to do or we hit any kind of time limit, I know it's noon and we were supposed to start at 11, but if you've got conflicts, let me know. I'm really interested to ask about the how you got feedback and where you knew what you needed to go do after each one. I think the panel and rejection is terrifying to people, but your recovery and push forward. I know they probably have to give you some, you know, things to work on or what you missed and what to work on for next try, but I don't know how much you can talk about or how much you're supposed to talk about. So
yeah, I can't really give like specifics, but so yeah, so I also mentioned how I was terrified to present to community people, and that was something I realized was going to have to change. So I had to force myself to start presenting to the community. So I started doing that, I think March of last year through my study group, through the Slack group. So yeah, after my first board, they gave me all the things, and it was stuff I knew. I knew there was nothing that was a mystery to me in my feedback. And it was stuff I knew that I kind of lacked in or needed to work on a little bit. And so that was definitely stuff I worked on. And I also just kind of figured a lot of stuff out, just going there and then having the experience and seeing what it was actually all about. That also helped me to kind of shift where I was focusing a bit more as well, if that makes sense. It's interesting. I feel like sometimes people just need to have that experience first to really understand the exam and what's being asked of you. And that's when I kind of started realizing it's more about being able to effectively communicate a solution that is going to, like I said earlier, going to have a high probability of success and low complexity. And it's not really about like these complex solutions. That's not what they're looking for. They're looking for how you can explain that the platform is going to solve business problems, and then maybe what else you can lean on. So, you mentioned AWS. AWS did become a go-to for me for archiving data as well as files. It goes into one place and you can easily, store it all in the same place and then access it all from that same place. So if you ever are given AWS in your scenario, it's an easy argument to say, well, I'm just going to use AWS. If you're not given it, you can also still rationalize it by saying this is a highly scalable system. It works with Salesforce really well. It's easy to get the data in and out and the files. So you just have to have your reasoning for your justification. So justifications are also very important. So you really want to have like your toolbox of go-to things. And for my first board, one of my go-to things was Heroku. And I was in this because it was suggested to me by someone else who passed the board to use Heroku as your data archival. And so I did that. And I had this whole, I don't even know how I got my stuff done in 3 hours on the first board, because I had a data model that had 30 or 40 objects. And I had this sub diagram of Heroku and how all that worked. And I'm like, I don't even know how I got all that drawn, but I did end up adding more diagrams for my second attempt, and I kept my system landscape a little bit more simple, but I guess I just swapped time there. So I found out that introducing Heroku can open up a can of worms. Even though I did know it, I wasn't an expert in it, but I did know it. I did the certification, played around with it. I was able to answer their questions, but we wasted a lot of time in Q&A on Heroku. And I thought, wow, there's no really extra points for Heroku, right? I could go to something way more simple than that, where I'm going to get a lot less questions and not waste time in Q&A. So that's where I shifted to something like using AWS S3. So you have to have your go-to things in your toolbox that you can rely on and always and use and try to fit into your solution. And if it doesn't fit, maybe you have a backup. So you always have to have a way to archive your files, and then maybe you have to expose them to community users. So something I got really familiar with is S Drive, which works with S3. So I installed it, I played around with it, I really understood how it worked. Because if I ever got questions about well, how does the security work, I could answer that.
Are you still, did we lose audio?
I'm here.
Okay, your box was stayed yellow and I couldn't hear anything. So I'm sorry, I assumed something was going wrong. I've had internet issues the past couple of days. That's great. So I think I was about to recommend on the channel that everybody who is pursuing this probably should start finding opportunities to speak and seeking opportunities to speak, explain, and be questioned.
Yeah, and that's another thing is going into this, I was terrified of public speaking, terrified. But I thought, okay, if I'm going to go to a review board, I'm going to have to start getting used to public speaking. So I started making myself present to community groups, and then looking for any opportunity I could, and then started coming up with presentations I could do at community events and submitting those. And now I'm at the point where I love presenting, and I love sharing knowledge with people. So it's not, I mean, yeah, I still get a little nervous, but I'm not terrified like I used to be. So it's, if you're like me and you're terrified to present to people or do a mock with the community, you're probably not going to have a high probability of success for the board. You really need to work on that stuff. Make sure you're presenting to community. And this is the other thing, is every time I would do a mock and I would get questioned on things that I wasn't quite sure about, I would write it down and I would go research it and I would get to know it really well. So mocks is a great way to find your gaps.
Any other tips? So my only tip ever has been that, so I'm still terrified of public speaking. I am speaking to groups probably twice a week, maybe 3 times now, regularly, and for the past 10 years, and I'm still horrible at it, and I'm still terrified all the way up until I get it. But I say I hate public speaking, but the person I pretend to be whenever I'm speaking loves it. And I try and get into that mindset just a few minutes ago, capitalize on the adrenaline and hop into an alter ego and try to do it. So do you have any other tips for conquering those fears now that you've been doing it for so long and so well?
And the other thing that helped me was just being on the study calls 4 times a week with the larger group. So I was always talking to a wider audience, and that really helped me desensitize that fear. But it also helped me with talking to people and explaining things. So they always say the best way to learn something is to teach it. So I would explain things to people and teach things, and it would help me to solidify my understanding and learning. Or if you did just learn something, to repeat it to someone else. So that was the benefit of having the study group for me. And it's still going. We still have it 4 days a week, and still people are still doing mocks on the weekends. And so all of it together would just really helped like get rid of that fear. I mean, I can tell you, I still hate mocks. I don't like them, and I'm glad I never have to do one again. But I got to the point where I was like, all right, everyone, inviting CTAs to all come judge me for my mocks. Let's get this done, and ask all the questions you need to ask, because I just know that the more questions I get, the better I'm going to get at this. So.
Did it help to be friends with them first, or was it better to have them as strangers and really noodling you?
I mean, yeah, some of them were people I knew already, or I got to know through the study group. So yeah, that helped. And yeah, it was funny. I wasn't terrified at all in my last board. It was when I got to my Q&A, I was very relaxed and calm, and I was more conversational with them, and very much more interactive, and I'd check in and say, does that make sense to you? Does that answer your question? And that's the thing, is approaching Q&A, you got to make sure you're confident and you're relaxed, and you're more like talking to a client. You're not just like throwing a bunch of stuff at them and then being silent. They don't like that.
Yeah, no, one of my favorite terms that I heard, I failed out loud a CTA type interview, and but the process was described to me, and when they described it, I knew I was nowhere near ready. It's a CTO whisperer, and I feel like that's the certification, is that you have to come in and be that calm CTO whisperer, be able to explain every concept end to end, and have a sales, business, user targeted, all pillars of the pyramid. Exactly. Conversation. Okay.
Exactly. And actually, Allison's on here, and she's explained what she does. And I've told her, I said, that's exactly the kind of thing you need to be able to do for the board. Like that kind of thing that she does every day, that's what they're looking for. You need to be able to, it's like a salesperson. She said she's in sales, right?
That's right. That's right. I work for Salesforce. And so I'm regularly meeting with customers I've never met before, explaining to them what I do, how I'm going to help them, and work with them and partner with them. And the other thing I would add to that too is getting really comfortable with understanding you might not be talking to a CTO. You might not be talking to someone who knows the technology as well as you are. So you always want to bring it back for the CEO, the CFO, and the other C-suite. What's the value for doing this? Yep. So it's not just about, hey, I've got this awesome solution from a technical perspective. It's an awesome solution from a technical perspective that's going to help your business. And when you're able to frame it that way, I think, and Melissa, correct me if I'm wrong as far as the board, I think that's kind of that underlying current that we always want to be thinking about, especially as technologists coming into it. It's easy to kind of gloss over that point, and we shouldn't do that.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I tell people. When, as you're solutioning, you really need to think about how is the solution going to help the business, and how can I justify this?
Does that include licensing?
Yes. So there's definitely a decision you need to make around licensing, because I mean, you could go like just give everyone a Salesforce full license, right? But that wouldn't make sense because external users, they don't need a full Salesforce license. Maybe not all internal users need a full Salesforce license. So you have to have your justifications as to why you're giving a platform license, or maybe you're giving sales plus service. Like there might be something in the requirements that tells you you need a specific kind of license. So you got to think like, all right, well, this might cost a little bit more, but it's going to give these features that are going to solve this problem and make the solution less complex. Whereas if they had another license, maybe we have to do a whole bunch of customizations and it becomes a bit hacky and creates a bunch of tech debt. I think that's the way you need to think. Like, how is this going to help the business? Lower amount of tech debt, lower amount of complexity, maybe a little bit higher cost, but it's a lower total cost of ownership. And that's a keyword or key statement that was given to me. Lower total cost of ownership. And that's a good one for when suggesting like mobile publisher or Salesforce One over a custom app. This is going to be lower total cost of ownership. It's going to solve these requirements. And maybe there's something where it's not quite clear. Like I said, you make an assumption to go in the way of going to the easier suggestion. Because like Allison said, in the back of your mind, you're going to keep thinking, how is this going to help the business? How is this going to help the business? How is this going to help project success? How is this going to affect total cost of ownership? Things like that. Maybe even ROI. You don't have to present that stuff, but that's how you have to think. You have to really think strategically around those things and then bring the technology in behind that. Don't start with the technology, but you start with the business problem. You're solving a business problem. How can the platform solve this business problem? And then decide from there what technology is the best fit.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's the weakest part of my pyramid is the financial pieces. Money makes, I'm scared and money makes me sleepy. I don't like to talk budget line items and stuff like that. And I think it's more because it's probably because those mistakes are very finite and traceable, where other things are approachable and degrees of accuracy are okay. But yeah, a spreadsheet line item or a miscount and a missed decimal place and a project is in massive trouble. I still love to lean on licensing experts, but I probably have to get stronger in understanding those breakdowns. And I'm very curious as to how deep. I mean, hopefully you didn't have to have numbers or dollars, but no. Scale.
No, but you know that a customer community plus license is going to cost more than a customer community license, right? Yeah. You have to know the features.
Okay.
You have to think about budgeting. But so this is the thing, is you usually go with the assumption of unlimited budget, right? But suggesting every Salesforce product like Marketing Cloud, when it just says they need to send emails, might be overkill. And it might be, that's expensive. And it's also going to bring more risk to your project, because Marketing Cloud, that's a whole other timeline, a whole other work stream. And where you can maybe suggest maybe an app exchange app or something. And it's not just because of the cost, but it's because it's really overkill for the requirement they're giving you. If you can find a few requirements that you say, okay, Marketing Cloud now makes sense, then you suggest Marketing Cloud, and then you have to understand the implications of bringing Marketing Cloud into a project, the complexity and the timeline and the governance around it, and sharing of data, and where to unsubscribes, come from, and what's the system of record for unsubscribing, and just some general things like that, which actually the solution architect exams helped with that. So I did the B2C solution architect, and it helped with some of that stuff, but it's not so relevant to CTA. I would say B2B is more relevant, but being able to think about it in that way. So it's less about the actual numbers and cost and more about just like cost benefit analysis, I would say. So don't be afraid to bring something in, even if you know it costs a lot of money, if it really makes sense and it's a good fit and you can justify it.
Gotcha. And a little tangent. So you're an MVP, correct?
I am not. I'm
You're not. Golden Hoodie,
yeah.
CTA, 20x exams.
30.
30. Okay, so are you leaving any of the acronyms for the rest of us, and what's next on your list?
I'm just going to work on some more certifications. I'm working on the Tableau CRM one right now. I can say you don't need to have that for the CTA, but you need to have like a basic understanding of Tableau, because you likely are going to want to recommend it, and you got to understand why you want to recommend it and what are the issues that it's going to resolve and how is it going to help the business. Like Allison said, like you got to really think about that. Like, how's this going to help the business? and knowing that, you know, if you have a lot, there's usually large data volumes and data archival that happens, and just understanding how Tableau CRM plays well with all that and resolve some of those problems, alleviate some of those issues.
So what personally is keeping you motivated on this astonishing learning and certification drive? Do you have an internal clock? Are you being held at gunpoint by somebody to get this many certifications by this year? What is blink twice if you're being held against your will? What is I am so in awe of your drive and constantly keeping after this. Do you have a mantra? Is there a book you're reading that motivates?
I get bored, basically. That's what it comes down to. So yeah, because I went to college and I was like, oh, I'm never going back to school. 2 years later, I was in school for my MBA. So, and I went for information systems, which was a really great foundation to get into Salesforce. So yeah, that's just how I am. Like, oh, I'm not doing anymore. Like after CTA, I've kind of been taking a break, but I've been studying now again, and it's been hard to really get into that mode, but it's just kind of like, yeah, I want to do this. I want to learn. I want to understand, and I get bored.
Okay. And do you have one of those time turners? I get bored too, but the time, you must be an amazing sponge of information. Are you eidetic memory?
No, I don't think so.
Well, it's amazing. All right. Well, I have a new hero. Anybody else have any questions? I think I've exhausted my set of 1, 2, or I'm just dumbstruck.
I actually have a question. This is Allison. Melissa, I know you talked a little bit about like, having Heroku in your back pocket and AWS. Speaking of certifications, do you recommend getting certified in both of those as part of the path to CTA? Or is it really just feeling comfortable with it rather than really pursuing the cert?
Yeah, I would say feeling comfortable with it. In fact, I feel like maybe knowing Heroku could have been detrimental, because I was like, yeah, I'm going to use it in my review board. And then I went and used it and realized that was probably a mistake. Maybe I don't want to use it. So like AWS, it's just having a general understanding of how AWS works. So I went and set up an AWS account, and I set up some S3 buckets, and just understanding like the security between AWS and Salesforce, because you're going to need to explain that. So just a basic understanding, and you can get that from just setting stuff up and doing proof of concepts if you haven't actually worked with it in real life.
Thank you. That makes sense.
I think that's the thing when it comes to external systems and other systems, really understanding the security between the systems and how you're going to protect data. That's the biggest thing. And then, maybe you just want to know a little bit, like, how, like, I came to know that like the record ID would be the best way to store the files in an S3 bucket, like have the folder name be the record ID. But yeah, it's like to that level. It's I would say a basic level.
And Allison, I didn't catch what your role was at Salesforce.
Sure. So I am an enterprise architect at Salesforce. And what that means is, as an enterprise architect, I need to work with customers in a pre-sales role to understand their business architecture as well as their technical architecture to help them come up with the solutions and even a roadmap for how they can progress leveraging the platform.
And you want to always make sure that that it's going to be highest probability of success, right? Because if it's not, then you've got an angry customer.
Absolutely.
So
100%.
So the CTA really is an enterprise architect credential. So the technical architect aspect of it, I feel like it's a little bit misleading. It's definitely more enterprise, and you need to understand how Salesforce is going to fit into the entire enterprise picture. And that's why they give you all the existing systems in a scenario.
That's a really good point, because I know, Melissa, you and I have talked about this, but I think that having an admin background gives you an edge even over a developer, which I think is counterintuitive when a lot of people look at this certification.
I do too, and I've been saying that. Like, I had to learn how to be an admin through this process. That's why I say you get into the system. Really, like the admins, they really understand security and sharing and data visibility, because that's what they get to deal with. And you really have to understand that aspect, but understand like how is something actually going to be used. I learned a lot of admin hacks and like not hacks, but like a lot of tricks, admin tricks that just became like things I had in my back pocket for when solutioning. Like a developer is definitely going to go with a complex solution because that's just how they think. Whereas an admin's like, oh, that's just a list view, right? That's easy. And it's like, that's the kind of solution you want to give. It's knowing what the capabilities of the platform are. And I feel like admins definitely have the edge there. Yeah, it's very strange. I used to hear people say, oh, developers, you know, they have the better chance of becoming CTA, and that's not the case. I don't know why that was ever a thing, but I really don't agree with that. I think there's a lot that developers have that can help, but there's a whole other aspect that they have to learn.
Hey, Karen, you came off of mute. Do you have a question?
Hey, yes, I have a question for Melissa. Thank you for great insights, Melissa, and Paul, for great questions. So I was just wondering, I happen to be in this Salesforce space for a decade, and I'm working as solution architect for Biogen in the RTP area, and I've done the system architect and application architect pyramids. I'm trying to see how I can progress to the next step, which is CTA. And the biggest gap I see for myself is basically fill out the technical details outside of Salesforce. So, Melissa, to your point earlier, you were saying how this CTA works in the space of enterprise. I have a lesser exposure to the enterprise applications and more to Salesforce, just because of how I chose my career so far. So how do you suggest I build that gap for myself?
I was going to ask the same question. That's my same exact background, Karen. Thanks.
Cool, thank you.
You're saying not work with other systems like MuleSoft or AWS or ERP systems?
I worked with ERPs, and that's about it. Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, and I work with some the CTA platforms. I mean, the call center platforms, and some integrations, point-to-point integrations, and middleware as well. But I'm not primary. I don't have hands-on, so I always have a enterprise team that defines either the standards or the team that actually I interact with to work with. And I've done the Salesforce piece, and they used to do the enterprise architecture or integrations team if it comes to integrations. And I've done the identity piece with a couple different providers. So I'm comfortable in that space, but I haven't done any financials or anything in that space.
Yeah, I wouldn't say you need that experience. If you have an understanding of what the systems would do, like if I was to tell you need to take payments in Salesforce and then send that financial information somewhere, do you know where that would go?
Yeah, probably Commerce Cloud, I would think, but I can, yeah.
Well, so think about this, like if they're telling you, all right, you need to take payments in Salesforce, there's usually another system in your enterprise landscape that deals with accounting, right? It's
Right.
the record that has the books. What would that be?
ERP.
Yes, exactly. So if you understand, have that basic understanding of what the ERP is there for, or, you know, it's like order fulfillment might happen there, or even invoicing can happen from there.
Right.
If you have that understanding, then you will understand when the integrations need to happen between Salesforce and an ERP system, or maybe ERP system back to Salesforce. It's that kind of understanding. You don't have to have the hands-on experience, I would say, but you just have to know what these systems do and how they are going to interact and share data with Salesforce, and when would that happen.
Gotcha. Can you fill in the similar, can you answer the question in the using the AWS example, just trying to understand how AWS fits into the Salesforce platform, right? I'm sure there's good use cases, but I'm just not aware of those.
So I started really looking into it for files and data archival. So when you need to push data out of Salesforce, it needs to go somewhere into a data warehouse. So AWS is a great solution for that.
Gotcha. So any other space I could read about those kind of things that you would suggest?
I would also suggest understanding different kinds of industries, which Salesforce has a lot of great case studies. There's a page out there that lists a whole bunch of them. And I know that other people said that that really helped them, because you never know the business use case you're going to get or what industry it's going to be in. So having an idea of these case studies for different industries can really help. I know people have said that they were so glad they looked into them beforehand, because it helped them understand the business case that they were given in their review board.
Scalable compute is another big one. So Amazon's AWS Lambda is one place that, so Salesforce functions are kind of bridging that. And there's also an AWS Connect, I believe, that is coming out or on the cusp, that makes being able to send heavy workloads where you hit governor limits in Apex and Salesforce, you can farm those out to an extensible architecture. And Salesforce Connect and Salesforce Functions are supposed to be kind of bridging, or AWS Connect and Salesforce Functions are supposed to be bridging that gap. And so there's a lot of use case there for going to AWS and going to an external hosting system to be able to run heavy loads and get data back and use them as a bus and use them for all their other features. So I want to say there was an AWS trailhead that was out there a while back.
I will check it out. Thank you. Those are really helpful. Thank you, Paul.
Welcome. Yeah, I have kind of the same problem. You know, I've been an enterprise architect for 20 years, and my solutions are somewhat dated when compared to the Salesforce ecosystem, but also the older companies that I've worked for. It's like, oh yeah, we just go to the mainframe for this, and we write COBOL for that, and then yeah, all of our on-prem storage does this, and then yeah, we use Salesforce for the front end, and that is the wrong answer. And I keep having to kind of knock down those cloud doors, find those new technologies and figure out where they need to be represented so I can do them there. My go-tos are Kafka and Splunk and AWS for heavy load. But as stuff like functions comes along, I'm having to add those in because I know that the CTA focus will be there. I'm having a little trouble justifying all of the exams to know the exact details to be able to be at that CTO whisperer level, because I don't feel like, and this is what's probably slowing me down on my journey, is there's a lot of detail in those exams and not necessarily that level of detail in the CTA, or at least in the role when you have to be the success manager. And that maybe that's a question for both of you, to do your enterprise architect role and to do the CTA role. Do you feel like you had to know all of the detail in each of the component exams, or is this a role that you can do without it?
So it's less about the low level details and more about the understanding. And I feel like the way you gain the understanding is to understand the low level details end to end, but you don't have to know every little thing. And there's certain things you are going to want to need to know and remember. Like for identity, you know, like with your SAML and your OIDC, there's keywords you want to remember when you're explaining those things. And I always tell people it's even less about the writing the flow diagram and more about how you explain it. And you really talk about how it's going to work for the user as well. So I think the prereq exams definitely, they cover the areas that you need to know in depth, but it's more bringing it up high level and having that the understanding end to end, I would say, and how everything fits together, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, they're not going to ask you detailed questions on how to set things up, I don't believe, but you still might want to know, because one, you just never know, and two, if you can give a few keywords about the setup of something, like maybe it's omni-channel, if you're using skills-based routing or queue-based routing. So if people suggest omni-channel, I usually will dig in, like, well, tell me what kind of routing you're going to use. And if you give a few keywords and you just tell the kind of routing you're going to use up front, I'm not going to dig there, right? It shows that you have an understanding. So that's the approach you want to take, is give a few keywords. You don't have to explain everything in depth, because you're going to run out of time.
Right.
Really hitting keywords and knowing the areas where you need to give a little bit more information, so that they're not going to start pressing on you about it, because they're going to be like, do they really know how omni-channel works? If you
Right.
just omni-channel, right? So.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Thank you. Thank you for that. Anyone else have any questions?
Hey, just a follow-up to the earlier conversation. Anybody has the resource that Melissa was talking about, the industry use cases? Just curious to check it out.
Let me see if I can find it.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, maybe follow, you should be able to find Melissa's Twitter handle. Let me post that link, and maybe she can.
We also have a shared channel between Ohana Slack and my group, where you can always ask questions.
Oh, your channel is on Ohana Slack?
Yeah, we have them connected through Salesforce Connect. So
oh, cool.
on Ohana Slack, it's Journey to CTA, which is connected with my group, CTA Study group.
Yeah, I am still waiting for Megan to give me admin access on Ohana Slack so I can tinker with some of that stuff. Well, we will do that. Cool. Any other questions? So I'm trying to find this. Copy.
It might actually be the success stories. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's it. I'll post it in here. I'm pretty sure.
Okay, looks like Bill Wu just posted something. Yeah, the customer success stories.
Yes, that's it. Yep.
Great, thanks, Bill.
Thank
Bill's
you.
a regular traveler on our path. Come on, Bill, you have to have some questions. Get them in now.
Hi, sorry, I was on my desktop, so I have some headphone issues. Thanks, Melissa. That's great to hear so much insights from you. Yeah, regarding that files discussion, I actually have some questions. You mentioned S3. I actually have a project trying to use that, but I also heard people saying that it's hard to control the security of those files.
Yeah.
My question is, there is kind of a very widely accepted file or documentation management solution, because Salesforce charges very high for the storage.
Yeah. So you're at, what was your question?
So do you have a kind of a widely used or recommended generic solution for the documentation of files management in a project?
Yeah, so my go-to is always use on-platform files, but have an archival strategy for those files, because you're gonna run out of space at some point, and I don't know, I don't really feel like it's the best thing to say, you can just keep buying more storage. That I don't feel like telling your customer that is gonna make them really happy. I feel like giving them this other system that they know that, you know, there's gonna be a cost to it, instead of this cost that could be unknown and just keep growing and growing, going out of time, is have an archival strategy. So I go with Salesforce files for document management, and then those documents go somewhere else at some point. And usually they go somewhere else when the data gets archived. That's how I approached it, because it made sense to me. If you're going to archive data, well, why do you want the files on Salesforce? So let's archive all of it and put it in one place. So when it comes to security for S3 or AWS S3, there's libraries where you can write components, but there's also app exchange packages that work well with S3 and provide the security for it. So the one I got familiar with was S Drive. Other people also like to use X Files Pro because it can work with a lot of different backend files management systems like SharePoint.
Yeah.
I believe it will
Okay.
help with security as well. So usually I would say an app exchange app is going to be your friend.
Yeah, thanks. Because we were trying to build our own and we realized it's not probably the best thing because it may take weeks.
S Drive. I played around with it. I think it's a great app that works with S3.
Cool, thank you.
All right, well, that was fantastic. Thank you, Melissa. And if nobody else has any questions or wants to sneak any in, I really appreciate it. And I'm glad to finally be connected with you on Twitter. I am sorry for again, for the chaos this morning.
No worries.
And
You know,
last.
I told Megan, you know, she mentioned you're going to have roundtables as well. I said, if you want to get me involved in any of that, to maybe help listen to people explaining their solutions or presenting a scenario, or you're doing a roundtable, just reach out and let me know. I'm more than happy to help the group.
Oh, fantastic. I am taking you up on that. I have it in writing now, it's recorded.
It's recorded.
That is great.
Reach out anytime.
And I would love to be able to cross promote anything else that you're doing or attend any of the other works that you're doing. You know, I am not CTA'd yet, but I'm always happy to be part of teaching. And there's every once in a while, there's something that I accidentally know enough on to be able to help with. So please let me know, let us know.
Cool.
We will be in touch.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everybody for coming. I'm going to go ahead and close this out now. We'll post this up here soon so everybody can get to it. Thanks for joining and fighting through the chaos to get here. We'll try not to let that happen again.